Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Ministry of Tourism's special interview program, Tourism One-on-One, where we explore topical issues affecting the tourism sector as we tackle the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm Kingsley Roberts, your host, and with me today is Executive Director of the Tourism Enhancement Fund, Dr. Carey Wallace. Good day, Dr. Wallace.
Hi, Kingsley. How are you?
Today we examine the support being provided by the Tourism Enhancement Fund to members of the industry during the COVID-19 pandemic. Dr. Wallace, tell us, initially, as soon as the pandemic itself hit, what was the initial response of the Tourism Enhancement Fund?
Well, we saw the threat coming. So even before we had cases here in Jamaica, we had known of COVID virus in our international markets. And one of the things that we set out to do right away is to ensure that to try and prevent it from actually coming to our shores. So we put in programs. We invested in programs, sanitization of the ports across Jamaica. Cruise ships were one of the methods in which the virus, or at least the fear of the virus coming in, was very strong. And so we did some sanitization programs in Ocho Rios, some in Montego Bay, and just to ensure that our people felt safe, that they weren't threatened by tourism. Because we're keeping the entire area sterile. And eventually, once we started having cases in Jamaica, we then facilitated the rollout of the protocols, the PPEs in the tourism space to ensure that our people were always protected. And
so what was TeFs' role in the development and rollout of the protocols?
So we supported TPDCO in coming up with the protocols, but of course we have levels of our stakeholders in tourism, where the formal hotels, the support services around it, the attractions and so on, and the informal sector that are in the resort towns. Now, COVID is a virus that doesn't care about whether you're formal or informal. So once you're a human, you are able to contract or transmit the virus. So we needed to ensure that our tourism space was always protected from top to bottom, formal or informal. And whereas a lot of the formal sector could handle their own PPEs, their hand sanitizers, their thermometers and so on, we had to go in and lend support to provide those PPEs for the smaller properties as well as the informal sector.
So take us back to last year, March. Personally, just explain for us, what was it like going through that process?
Well, none of us have been through a global pandemic, so I think all of us were pretty much learning day by day, week by week as we went into it. I personally hope that it wouldn't have lasted more than a few weeks or months. I laugh when I look back at that now, but you were hoping that it was a bump in the road that you could overcome easily. Thankfully, we've been able to hold strain, so to speak, because of all the initiatives that we've taken to ensure that the industry was protected. We created a resilience corridor, and then we invested in making sure that resilience corridor had all the necessary resources so that the tourism workers, as well as the visitors, would have the best chance of still having a holiday experience without being exposed to the virus.
All right, and of course, TEF would be providing support to various subsectors within the industry itself. So what type of support has TEF been providing for hotels?
So for the small hotels and so on, we actually purchase kits that including the hands-free garbage bins, the hands-free sanitizer dispensers, the thermometers, and the stickers on the ground for social distances and so on. So we purchased these packages in bulk, and then we distributed to the smaller properties across Jamaica. We also had some what we call resilience buckets, which had with a bucket with a spout for potable water, and in there we had masks and we had sanitizing gel that we would give to the informal sector, so a jerk chicken man and so on, who would still interact with the visitor that comes. We wanted to make sure they were abiding by COVID-19 protocols as well. So we provided that support to the formal and informal sectors as well. In fact, our tourism entrepreneurs who would have had loans with our loan facilities through Exim and Jamaica National, we gave moratoriums on those loans during that time to ease the burden from them having to repay the loans with the downturn in business caused by the COVID fallout. So we helped right across the board in linkages.
So for the bigger properties, what would have been the primary assistance?
The bigger properties, we pretty much figured that they were able to handle a lot of it themselves, and so we concentrated our resources on the smaller ones.
The smaller properties, okay.
The bigger ones would have benefited from a lot of the training programs which we implemented during COVID. So with COVID, we had a lot of tourism workers who were at home.
Right.
The positives out of that, if there's a positive at all, is that they now had time to actually undergo the training programs that we had with the JCTI. Whereas before, they were busy at work and so on, they come home from work, they're tired, they had the time to do the training and certification programs that we have. So we moved our training and certification programs online to make it easy and they could do it from anywhere.
Right.
And then because they had the time, we had a large amount of enrollment. In fact, we made the programs free of cost to the tourism worker. So that enabled us to train up our people so much more during this time, so that when the industry recovers, we're not just recovering from where we left off, we're recovering in a much better position as far as our human capacity is concerned.
So let's go back to the smaller properties now. You said you would have handed out various devices, and expound a bit more in terms of the types of properties and where across the island would you have been distributing?
Right, so we would have gone to all the resort towns, all the licensed small hotels would have gotten the resilience packages, the bigger ones with the bins and the thermometers and so on. The informal sector, where we had the bucket packages, that we really spread across Jamaica. So Kingston, all the way on the north coast, south coast as well. We had those buckets all over. In fact, they were quite popular, quite well appreciated. And it gave confidence not just to the vendor, but it gave confidence to the patrons who would still be patronizing those vendors. Knowing that they now have the kids to be clean and so on. We also partnered with the JHTA, and we provided masks that were branded JHTA and TEF, and that was distributed. It was part of their ambassador program. So what was happening was that tourism was doing so well as far as containment of the virus. Very, very few cases in the tourism corridor, the resilience corridor. However, where the cases were increasing were in the communities of Jamaica. And, hats off to the JHTA for taking the initiative to say, hey, since our sector has learned so well how to handle the pandemic, why not be ambassadors and start going into the same communities and then providing masks and then giving training lessons on how to social distance, how to conduct your normal business, but with COVID protocols in place. And hats off to President Clifton Reeder and former President Robinson, who had spearheaded this program. But we supported by purchasing the masks and donating to them. So right across Jamaica, you would see those JHA and TEF masks that we.
And the masks would also benefit the small producers of masks as well.
Well, speaking of support to the small producers, we have the Linkages program where that's our mantra or mandate to as much as possible get our local suppliers and manufacturers to supply what tourism consumes. So to reduce the leakages, meaning when the visitor comes here on island, they consume while they're here. If what they consume is what we have to import, then that's a leakage. The money goes back out of the country. Now, if we can make sure what they need to consume here in Jamaica is what we can supply locally, then that will be a way of making sure the tourism dollar gets right into the communities across Jamaica and creates the wealth that we want to see. So that program has been ongoing, and we built up our relationship with the agricultural sector to supply tourism. We built up our relationship with the manufacturers to supply tourism, built up relationships with the artisans, the craftsmen, and so on. So when tourism took a dip, you can imagine they were displaced significantly. And one of the initiatives that we did during the pandemic is that we supported these suppliers by purchasing their products, but particularly the farmers, that were rotting in the fields now because of the lack of the demand. and then creating care packages and then distributing those care packages in the resort towns across Jamaica. And this was a way to reach to those Jamaicans who were not necessarily formal tourism workers, but were benefiting from tourism. And without tourism, they were now going hungry pretty much. So this was our way of having a win-win. We were purchasing from the farmers, so keeping them turning over, keeping them earning, and at the same time feeding our people so that they can survive during this pandemic. And when tourism resumes, everybody is healthy and fed, and their business is still operating, their farms are still working, so that industry can restart very quickly.
All right, thank you. That brings us to the end of our program. Thanks for joining us today, Dr. Wallace. Thank you to our viewers for tuning in. Join us next week when we conclude our discussion on the support being provided by the Tourism Enhancement Fund to tourism stakeholders during the COVID-19 pandemic.